What's up, YouTube, and welcome to the video of games I picked up in the month of February 2019. Today I'm going to tell you about some stuff I got over the month. I did a little bit of travel. I went to Austin, Texas for the first time, and also hit up San Antonio, Texas while I was there because they're pretty close. One thing I would say about that city is it's very fun. Went actually for the Radwood event of 80s and 90s cars that was all on display. Had a great time at the car show. Video game hunting there was not as great as I expected. I actually find the prices to be pretty high in Texas, which seemed to be pretty similar to what I've experienced before in like the Dallas area of town. So I didn't really get a whole lot that trip, even though I was expecting to. Most of the stuff I found was local over the last month and also online purchases. So that said, let's go ahead and get started. Got some interesting stuff for the Sega Master System this month, and two games that I've been looking for a while. First one of these was Paperboy, and this came out pretty late in the Master System life in the US. It is pretty faithful to the arcade version as far as graphics. It was kind of an alternate reality 8-bit Paperboy for me because Paperboy was one of the first NES games I had as a kid. So I'm very familiar with that version. This one just felt a little bit awkward because I'm so used to playing that NES version. What I would say, like I said, the graphics are better probably than the NES version, but the sound is not very good in this one. It doesn't have a lot of like the, I don't know, effects to know when you landed a good paper shot like you have in the NES version. So it actually makes it a little bit less rewarding to play just due to the sound design. It's a little odd. But kind of interesting that this came out on the Master System as well. I don't think this game sold very well. You don't see it too often, so very happy to get that in the collection. And then the other Master System game I got was a big one off my want list. This was one I happened to find locally, but I've been looking for this game for a long time, and that is Alex Kidd in the Shinobi World. So this is one of the, I think, 4 or 5 Alex Kidd games on the system, and this one takes place in Shinobi-type ninja territory, but very cartoon-like. I really like the Shinobi series, so I consider this kind of like a side game to the series, and honestly, the gameplay fits right in. I played this quite a bit this month. Got stuck on just like a little frustrating part, but other than that, the game isn't too difficult, and probably will go back and try to beat this game pretty soon. This one is kind of a neat Master System game. It's another very late release for the system, and it came in a blue cartridge. This is one of the, I believe, 2 US games that came in a blue cartridge. But the way to tell that you have a US version is that the manual is still the vertically styled shape, not the horizontal ones like the European ones are. So be careful with that if you're looking for this game. There's a lot of European copies of this game that are much more common, but this US version with the blue cart is pretty tough to get. So very happy to find this for the collection. Moving on to some more Sega stuff, I got 2 upgrades for Sega Genesis this month. Both of these games were games that I had before, but these are better versions now. So this is The Punisher, a very desirable Capcom beat-em-up that is pretty difficult to find for the system. The situation with this one is I've had the cartridge of it for a really long time. I started to try to piece it together complete. I got a very sun-faded box for it that a game's been sitting in for several years, and now I found a much nicer box for it. However, I still need the manual and the temporary tattoo that the game originally came with. So this one has been a journey to try to get complete. Genesis game manuals are just very difficult to find loose. So someday maybe I'll get a complete copy or just stumble upon a complete one and get a complete upgrade on that one, but still I'm making some progress there. The other one I got some progress on is Gargoyles. This one is one I just had cartridge only, but this one has gone up in price quite a bit lately, and I found a box for it this month. This is one of the late release paper boxes, so it's not in mint condition by any means, but it is definitely an upgrade from a loose cart, and of course still need a manual for this one as well. So very nice to get those upgrades, like I said though, either way. Moving on to some Turbografx stuff. So Turbografx games I've been buying a lot over the last couple years, Turbografx and Turbo Duo games, but a lot of these I'm just buying online. What was really strange is I found 3 of these games on a local business trip, so very happy to get all 3 of these. I needed these in my collection, and the first one of these is one that I used to own in the outer box even, and I stupidly sold it about 5 or 6 years ago. That is Dragon's Curse, and this is part of the Great Wonder Boy series. This is technically Wonder Boy 3, The Dragon's Trap. However, Sega owns the rights to Wonder Boy in name alone. However, the gameplay and everything else is just the same. It's just that NEC and Hudson could not call the game Wonder Boy on their system. So very cool game for the Turbografx. Again, I have no idea why I sold my boxed complete copy, but very happy to get this back in the collection. The other two Turbografx games I got I had never had before. First one of these is Tailspin. I haven't tried this one yet. I have not heard good things about it. When you see Tailspin, you probably think like the Capcom NES and other Disney Capcom games. These were not made by Capcom, so don't let that fool you. I believe these are American developed and not considered to be very good. There's also a Darkwing Duck game for Turbografx that's very difficult to find. Don't have that one yet, but I've also heard it's pretty terrible. The other one I got for Turbografx this month is Cybercore. This is probably one of the lesser shooters on the system, but always happy to get another shooter in the collection, and looking forward to checking this out. I haven't played this one yet either. Moving on, I got an Xbox game this month, which I don't buy a whole lot of because I've got pretty much everything I wanted for the system. This is one I just stumbled on at a good price. I've owned this game on, or I own it on another system, which is the Dreamcast, and that is Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I was curious how the Xbox version of this game stacked up. Haven't had a chance to pop it in yet and check, but this is one of the more expensive Xbox games to get, so very happy to find it at a good price, and I'm definitely a fan of the series. It's just I've logged all my hours and gameplay in the Dreamcast version over the years, not this version. So there's also a PS2 version of this game too out there, and I don't have that one either. Moving on to Sony system, I got a PSP game, another system I don't buy a whole lot of games for, but this is one that was kind of a hole in my collection. I like this series. I don't know why I hadn't bought this until now. It's not a super expensive game, but that is the Darkstalkers Chronicle. I believe this has a mix of some of the arcade series games. Like, I don't know if it's a compilation of all the classic ones, or if it's just like a mega mix of the characters from the series. But either way, definitely like these Darkstalkers fighter games, and looking forward to checking it out on the PSP. Got two other games this month, and then I'll move on to some other stuff. While I was in Austin, I found a game for a system I have never bought a game for, and I don't even own the system, but I am a huge Taito fan, so I just was a sucker and decided I had to get that. And that is Puzzle Bobble Versus for the Nokia N-Gage, or the side-talking phone, whatever you'd like to call it. I've never owned anything for N-Gage, and it actually got me kind of looking into this system a little bit. I thought this was interesting in a few different ways. So number one, that this was called Puzzle Bobble in the US. Most of the games in the series were called Busted Move, so I thought that was interesting. They retained the original title. The artwork's actually pretty good on it, considering some of the Acclaim published versions of the series were not very good. So I'm looking forward to maybe checking this out if I ever get an N-Gage. The other thing I noticed was, for some reason, like, I don't know if the N-Gage was sold out of a distribution hub in Texas, but I saw N-Gage games all over the place on that trip, and I don't ever see these locally, so it was very unusual to me. The other thing I noticed is nobody has the systems for sale, at least in those shops. So looking on eBay, it seems like most of the N-Gages that are out there are in Russia or China. I don't really know why that is. But the system has gone up quite a bit. It's not like a really cheap purchase like I assumed it would be. So someday I may check out the N-Gage, a system I've never had really any interest in, but this one kind of piqued my interest, so we'll see. The last game I got on my trip was one I've been wanting for a really long time. I was super happy to find this in a store. It's not in mint condition, but because of that, they gave me a really good price on it, and a really nice shop owner that I talked to down there. So this was Jet Grind Radio for the Game Boy Advance. I'm a big fan of this series. Owned the Dreamcast game since the day it came out. I've owned the Xbox sequel since the day it came out. For some reason I totally forgot this Game Boy Advance version came out when it was released, and then it became very difficult to find. This is a really interesting title for the Game Boy Advance. So this was developed by Vicarious Visions, who made all the Tony Hawk Pro Skater ports for the Game Boy Advance. And really it plays pretty well. The thing I think is interesting about this is they tried to keep it 100% faithful to the Dreamcast version as far as like the script of the game and the style. And then they adopted an isometric style to replace the 3D, obviously, the Dreamcast version. That being said, I played it quite a bit this month, but it does have some limitations, and that with the 3D isometric perspective, it is very hard to see depth perception of this with some of the jumps you need to make. So Not exactly an easy game, but definitely looking forward to trying it some more. I just think it's really impressive what they were able to pull off with the system, and just a really neat entry in the series that kind of got forgotten. Sega really put out a lot of their classic Dreamcast titles on the Game Boy Advance, and a lot of them are just very difficult to find. For some reason, they had some kind of publishing agreement with THQ, so they're all done pretty much through THQ whenever you find these, but happy to get another one of these in the collection. So that said, that's all the games I got this month. Let's move on to some other stuff I got. First one of these was a Dreamcast 4X memory card, the official one. This is something that's really nice to have for my Dreamcast collection. I have like 2 of these already, but with the VMUs being so easy to fill up with how much the game is hog memory sometimes, these are really handy to have. And I actually thought about getting a couple more of these, and maybe putting all of my VMU saves onto these just to have it all in one place, or all, in a much easier thing to find versus hunting down a bunch of random VMUs when I want to play a game. So we'll see, but always nice to get these. I found this really cheap locally, so nice to get that. They are getting a little bit expensive now. Next thing I got, it was a stack of manuals. This was another thing that I found in Texas, was just a bunch of stores that were selling loose manuals, which is always something I welcome. Several of these are for the NES, so we'll go ahead and get started with these. First one of these is Treasure Master, with that super rad dude on the cover. This is kind of an interesting manual because they were running a big contest with this game where you could win cash prizes and all this other stuff, trips, and you had to take a picture of like some screen in the game, but do it like really quick once you bought it to meet the deadline, and then send in some other proofs of your achievement, and then they would enter you in the contest. So I'd really be curious whoever won the Treasure Master grand prize, because it was kind of a unique concept for a game with all that sweepstakes stuff being a big part of it. Next one of these is Heroes of the Lance. This is one of the Dungeons & Dragons series games for the NES. Not really one of my favorites. Next is Jaws by LJN. Then we have Hunt for Red October, Round Ball, probably one of the lesser common basketball games for the system. And then I got one Super Nintendo manual. This is a game I don't have yet, but this is a deceptively rare game for the Super Nintendo, and that is Tecmo Super Bowl 2 Final Edition, I believe it's called. Special Edition, sorry. This was limited release by design. I've actually found the original Tecmo magazine ad for this game, and they said it was a short print game, and I believe it, because this cartridge and manual and box are all very difficult to find now. So got a good deal on this, and hoping someday I'll get the cart and box and can make it complete. But if you're ever like rummaging through dollar bins of sports games, look out for this one, because it is pretty expensive just for a loose card on Super Nintendo. So that is all the game stuff I got this month, with the exception of a big stack of magazines I bought. So I think if you've watched the last couple of my videos, I've been slowly picking up some holes in my GameFan magazine collection, and this month I kind of hit the mother load. There was a seller on eBay who was blowing out a whole bunch of these at really low prices, and he agreed to combine all the shipping for me, which at the price he sold everything to before, I don't even know if he made any money. The shipping on these is pretty expensive due to the weight of a GameFan magazine. But I'm very happy to get the stack in my collection. Unfortunately, he was listing these things like sporadically over a series of several days, and people were snapping them up like as soon as they were getting listed. So I didn't even get to scratch the surface of everything he had, but I bought as many as I could. So the first one of these is a earlier issue. This one is kind of interesting in that it has the Jaguar and 3DO on the cover. But this one, even though the cover is not really stuff I'm interested in, this is actually an issue I really recommend, because it has about a 10-page spread on shooters of the time, and talks about some arcade games and also shooters that were from a few years prior, all part of a special, magazine article that they did that month. So highly recommend this particular issue if you're looking at old GameFans. Another one I got was another early one. I believe this was a Chuck Rock issue. Not exactly a great series. Then we move into a Earthworm Jim issue. This is one of the later ones. This was really a big spread on the SegaNet service when that first launched for the Dreamcast. And kind of interesting. Read through that. This one was Super Punch-Out. This one, there was a cool editorial column in it that said this was the first Nintendo game to appear on the cover of a non-Nintendo powered magazine. Nintendo was very close to their rights of their games, and they did not want their first-party releases on other magazine covers. So it was kind of interesting that they loosened the floodgates on this one, and since then there's been several Nintendo first-party properties that appear on magazine covers. Another earlier copy, this one was all about the 32X. Not exactly a great issue, but it was all about the launch titles coming for the 32X when it was hot and new. This was kind of from the phone book era of game magazines that they really ballooned about 94 and 95, and these are really cool to see just how much stuff they packed in these magazines at the time. Next is a Jet Grind Radio cover. So just was speaking about my love for that game. Very happy to get this one in the collection, and this was obviously one of the later issues. Then we have, I'm not sure what this is, Skeleton Warriors and Earthworm Jim 2. They were huge Earthworm Jim fans. I was reading the reviews in these, and they were like, best game ever, 100%. I like that game, I like the series, but I don't really remember it being like that mind-bogglingly good, but they really, really loved Earthworm Jim. Next was an Oddworld Abe's Exodus cover, another later issue. Then we have Gex Enter the Gecko from the PS1 era, Crash Bandicoot 2 cover, about the same era, Tomb Raider 2. A little bit later, this is for Mortal Kombat Gold on the Dreamcast. Then we have Rayman 2 on the N64. And finally, a Fighting Force cover, another PS1 era cover. So, very happy to get a big stack of these in the collection. I would love to get a complete GameFan run. I don't think a whole lot of people have done that. I do know that issue 1 is prohibitively expensive when it does come up for sale, so unless I luck into one of those, it's probably not going to happen. But I'm enjoying going through these, and they're still a pretty fun read, so that about does it for the month. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.